Now let's get on to the content stealing. And of course that serves actually as a great segue to another thing that I wanted to do today, which is React content, baby. All right, we were talking about like I was talking about, you know, the problems with liberalism, etc., etc. We are going to look at this nice more perfect union video. And this in my notes here, this is supposed to be like well, this is a certain type of video I have in mind where like a lot of social democrats and liberals will argue for objectively good things, but they will say, I don't know if these underlying systems need to be changed. You know, like the systems of businesses that operate for profit. And I thought that to that effect, this video would be an interesting watch. Shout outs to More Perfect Union. I have covered their content before. I will cover it now. You should go see their stuff. It's good. All right. Now let's get on to the content stealing.
If you're a pet
now that
owner,
I've plugged
you've
them.
probably been noticing that your vet bills have become more and more expensive over the years.
Damn. Is that $27,000 on a veterinarian bill? Jesus fucking Christ. That's a vet bill. That's for somebody's dog or something.
But it's even worse than you might think. The cost of vet care has gone up by 60% in the last decade. That's double the rate of inflation in the same time period.
Ah, yes, double the rate of inflation. You want to keep your pet alive? Give me all your money? I mean, yeah, basically. I mean, as this video gets that, I think. But, like, as we've humanized animals, as we've understood that animals are like, oh, they have feelings too, and they enjoy life, and we love our pet dog or pet cat or whatever, veterinary care has become more and more of an inelastic good, something that you wouldn't in your right mind ever say no to. So that allows companies to just charge you more and more and more and more for services that don't actually cost very much. They'll be like, yeah, this costs $8,000 to keep your dog alive. By the way, if you don't cough up $8,000, your dog's gonna die. Sorry. And because they're corporations, they're comfortable with doing that. Because that's the basis on which all business occurs in a capitalist model. But let me not like get ahead of myself.
When you consider that more than 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
60%, 60%.
Is it even possible to own a pet anymore?
Oh, hey, it's the one clip where the bird landed on the podium.
Now, this all really hit home for me personally when my dog Utah got sick. Aside from chasing frisbees, my lovable...
That's the same kind of dog as Radical Reviewer. You guys know Radical Reviewer? I watch his channel every now and again. It's good stuff, very informative, and he has his dog just sitting in front of the camera. I like it.
8-year-old cattle dog loved food. So when I noticed that she wasn't interested in eating, I knew something was very wrong. I took her to...
Never heard of this individual. They're cool. They do book reviews. True to the name, Radical Reviewer. You know.
The vet, and after some tests and x-rays, they told me that she had fluid in her chest and that it was critical. So I rushed her to an emergency hospital called Blue Pearl, where
fucking Google Earth zoom in.
They ran even more tests and x-rays. But with no clear diagnosis, the only definitive thing they gave me was the bill. $3,258.
Yikes, dude.
On the spot. Now,
on the spot? Christ.
That didn't even include the surgery that she might need, which would cost thousands of dollars more.
Ooh.
This was the beginning of a 6-month journey.
Okay, now I think it's important to disclaim here. Surgery is authentically expensive. You know, again, it's something that I believe should just be subsidized by the state. Because if you need that shit, then you need that shit. There ain't no two ways about it. But surgery is like authentically already like kind of expensive. It is not like tens of thousands of dollars expensive per surgery.
Trying to save our dog's life.
Although again, that depends on the surgery. If it's like some experimental shit, then maybe.
Taking her to different vets and spending thousands of dollars in the process. We were desperate to help her, but I also started feeling a little bit exploited, and I know many Americans are going through the same things.
I just got financially assaulted by my dog's vet.
Don't cry, don't.
Financially assaulted. That's a banger. Drop a follow and like cheer some bits and subscribe or something if you've ever been fucking financially assaulted by I don't know, a doctor's office or otherwise place of business, or you know, your bills. That too. Jesus Christ, is that $13,000?
Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry.
The veterinary industry is a fucking racket.
Animal healthcare is a f***ing scam.
When I started looking into it, I found endless complaints of vet bills through the roof, unexpected charges, and people feeling like they had no choice but to pay up.
Veterinary medicine is the gold rush of 2024.
I call it the rise of.
Now that's a sentence that you don't want to fucking hear. Wow, it's like the gold rush in that you're fucking mining for money. Dog, we're talking about like animals' lives.
Big vet.
These massive private equity firms are buying up veterinary clinics in the hundreds all across.
And of course it's private equity, because it's always private equity. These are like the venture capital vultures, or just otherwise just capital vultures. It almost sounded like she was like, how can I spin this well for capitalism? Honestly, yeah, it's kind of hard to distinguish, like, okay. Honestly, there's not much difference in framing if you were trying to be pro this behavior and anti this behavior. Like this, you would say the same thing if you wanted to make bad and wanted to make it look bad, and if you wanted to make it look good. You would say it's you know, the veterinary business or like veterinary medicine is like a gold rush, you know? That's some shit that like you tell that to the average person, they're like, oh fuck. You tell that to a boardroom, they're giving you a standing ovation and being like, yes, we will invest billions of dollars, or I don't know, millions, however much they have, into this.
Rush of 20
clinics in the hundreds all across the United States.
We talked to veterinarians
So those private equity firms have bought up a shit ton of clinics.
and journalists.
Again, reminiscent of the hostile takeovers of the 80s and 90s. It seems like that's become a new standard.
To find out exactly why your vet bill has gotten so high and how the same forces are coming for everything from your dentist to your favorite sports team. Americans weren't always obsessed with pampering our furry friends. Early pet ownership was for more practical purposes. Think more barnyard cat and less Barney. But as cities grew, so did our affection for pets. And over the past few decades, as families grew smaller and people got lonelier, pets became part of the family. Pet ownership in America has exploded in recent years. 94 million households now have pets, with 23 million of those adopted during the pandemic. And it's big business. Americans spent $38 billion on pet health care last year.
$38 billion? Jeez, that's a lot.
With costs climbing about 10% a year. This is financial journalist Helene.
By the way, that already outstrips inflation and definitely outstrips the growth in wages that those kinds of people would typically be spending on that. Like for the sake of analyzing this, I'm basically cutting out the kinds of people who would have enough money to throw around that these kinds of costs wouldn't like mean anything to them, because those are the people that profit off of this kind of trend, right? The bulk of that money that's being spent on like veterinary care, the bulk of this comes from people who earn a wage or a salary. And wages and salaries, to the extent that people depend on them, right? Like you're earning a wage, you're not like getting money from your investments. That has been stagnant. So that 9.6% is basically how it appears. You actually, in a way, you actually don't really need to subtract inflation from that, because that kind of assumes that the purchasing power of your money is also increasing by a certain amount to match inflation. It is not.
Financial journalist Helene Olin.
The thinking is that people will do anything for their pets and that they will spend any amount of money that it takes. And this is in part where private equity and corporations, again, come in to the veterinary business. They see people who will pay the bill no matter what.
She says as pets have become humanized, their care did as well.
25 years ago, if your pet needed an MRI,
Yeah, see, this is what I was talking about earlier. People will do anything to keep the cute little doggy alive because they love the little doggy, and the doggy is nice and brings them happiness, right? So companies see that and they're like, oh, they'll do anything? Great, let's just like exploit the shit out of them and charge them that much more money. No one person at a company needs to be thinking this way. It is enshrined into the law that this is how companies behave. They operate on a profit basis. And with ever like shrinking margins of profit, where's that fucking graph that I was looking at earlier today? Here, hold on. Tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Graph. Let me see. I swear there was a graph that demonstrated that like profit margins have actually been shrinking over time. This is a very like Marxian concept. That like over time, as businesses expand, like there's less and less profit to be made comparatively in a theoretical sense because things near a sort of market saturation, right? Like when market saturation is reached, that means there's nowhere new to expand like real business operations. So the only money that is there to be made is in like basically enshittifying your existing products or services so that you can get more money for the same thing or like break it up into separate smaller things to get more money out of the entire unit. That's why nowadays, like, you know, to give an example with cars, now there's like cars where it's like, oh yeah, you're not allowed to reach the top speed of this car or something like that. Or better yet, you're not allowed to have the heated seats. You know, like the seat warmers will not work unless you pay us subscription money monthly. Right? That is an example of the way that the tendency of the rate of profit to fall motivates companies to engage in behavior like this. It's a finite world, but the system that we have demands infinite growth because, you know, line has to go up. And when line has to go up and the line becomes like increasingly detached from the material things that you provide, the actual quality of those things, then you'll make line go up in ways that is blatantly like cannibalistic of like people's actual livelihoods. This is an inherent flaw of the system. This is not something that you can even correct for with a very heavy social democratic welfare state, because the same pressures underlying that whole thing will remain. There will still be the pressure for companies to keep their head above water in a monetary sense, which means they're going to have to find more profit where a lot of times there isn't more profit to find. You know?
MRI, it was often hard to find. There were a few doctors doing it here and there, but you didn't really see it. It wasn't that common. Now it's an extremely common procedure, and that's in part also because of the rise of Big Vet.
Like me, she
Oh, boy.
found out about all this and wrote about it after her dog got sick.
Big
Her
Vet
meat poodle
doesn't sound
I
good.
get a diagnosis that my beloved dog is dying in the heart of that awful winter of the pandemic. I got the list of recommended cardiologists, right? And I look and I see everything seems to be VCA, Blue Pearl. I was distraught, but there is a part of me that's thinking, gee, why am I getting all the names of these chains? Aren't there independent cardiologists? This is a little strange.
The vet at VCA put Katie on a 300.
Also, how's the volume for you guys? The volume of the video? For me, it seems like it's mostly in the green. Hopefully it's not like too loud or too quiet or something.
$100 a month medication that did end up extending her life. But boy, that price tag was tough to swallow. So was what Helene found out next. VCA, her dog's clinic, wasn't even owned by vets. It's owned by Mars, the candy company behind Skittles,
Damn.
M&Ms, and Snickers that has a net sales of $50 billion a year. They own
Well, yet one of the many problems, again, inherent to a system that is driven by the need to make profit and to get the maximum amount of revenue that is possible, is that there's always the incentive for companies, no matter their stated purpose, to become run by financial bureaucrats, as opposed to, like, you know, actual professionals that have a relationship to the practice. Again, it's a problem of the relationship that people have to work, not just the, like, monetary numbers attached to it. Although this is a fucking insane number. You know, that's how you get doctors' offices, veterinary clinics, hospitals, etc., where obviously doctors and nurses work, but increasingly it's becoming dominated by administrative staff, and it's not run by the doctors and nurses who actually have expertise in public health, in individual health, in like the, and have a vested interest in the well-being of their patients, but rather it's dominated and owned and controlled by bureaucrats who deal primarily in stocks and financial portfolios where line goes up, but like every decision they make, it only relates to that. It has nothing to do with the health or well-being of the patients. Oftentimes, you know, the more you try to extract this kind of value from something that is like necessary for life, that leads to line going up, necessarily correlating to the well-being of your patients deteriorating in a medical environment such as this.
Various clinics and hospitals, as well as pet food and products. The Mars family also happens to be one of the wealthiest in the country.
VCA
Is that
also happens
McLean, Virginia? Fucking course.
to be one of the wealthiest in the country.
VCA.
McLean, by the way, the reason I highlight that is because McLean is a fucking suburban hellscape of a place. I don't know if you could call it a city or a town or whatever. That place is just a fucking wreck. It's like the back rooms out there. But the houses all cost like more than you earn in 5 years, probably. Or 10 years even.
Is Blue Pearl is Banfield, and they're owned by Mars. They are the largest
Or 20
vets in the United States. They have over 2,000 veterinary clinics. The second largest is another family-owned group, JAB, based in Europe. They own NVA.
Yes.
National
JAB Holding Company. Again, this is not a medical company. This is a fucking investment firm that owns medical practices. Holding company, their business is owning things.
Veterinary Associates, and Pete's Coffee, Einstein Bagels, Panera, and your dog and cat.
Over the last decade, massive corporations and private equity firms have been taking over vet care at an alarming rate, owning up to 50% of clinics and up to 75% of emergency hospitals. They're also snapping up pet insurance companies and even pet food brands. Among the companies with ties to private equity are PetSmart.
Again, this is all like, they mention it here. This is all consolidation. There's like a few, every industry you look at, it's like this. You look at the industry and you look inside and there's like a few giant holding companies or equity firms or whatever the fuck. Places that probably have some office on Wall Street or some city where it's just like they look at numbers on the computer screen and stock portfolios all day. But they own like the entire landscape of a certain product. Like increasing, you get companies like this where they own a lot of different like pet related products or something like that, which could constitute either a horizontal or vertical monopoly in some sense of the word. Or you get like a smorgasbord of companies where they may not have a monopoly on any one market, but they have their fingers in so many pies that they have like an impossibly large profile that if it isn't a monopoly is logistically impossible without some form of oligopoly, you know? Like, this is just JAB Holding Company, and it's all this shit, you know? This isn't even accounting for the other big, this isn't even accounting for all of the things, like all the properties that these 4 companies own. You know, and these are just the companies that have a really big profile in pet care. there's like increasingly capitalism enables a cycle of consolidation because it is a system based on profit and market competition. It fuels a cycle of consolidation that eventually results in a few giant mega business magnates, which are operating solely with the objective of like outcompeting the other business magnates, right? The objective of a competition is to win the competition. The other players in the competition are your opponents. And that is an extremely toxic package of incentives in an economic setting. Because if you get companies that are so big and thus have like ownership over like goods and services that in some senses could be like essential. Like imagine one of these, I think it was, what is it? It's the company that owns Coca-Cola, whatever, like one of those grocery companies that owns like dozens of grocery stores. You get companies that own like tons of places with essential goods and services. And now their only obsession is outcompeting the other guy who can cut costs harder, who can have a bigger price margin, who can basically at all costs outlast the other guy so that their business empire cracks and shatters under financial insolvency, and then you get to go and scoop up the pieces of whatever's left. That necessarily entails a lot of services like this breaking down and deteriorating over time. One might say, why is there a competition? Yeah, this like society is not a fucking competitive venture. It is a collaborative venture on a collaborative bedrock. Brother, we're all living in this world. You know, this is not a fight to the last man standing. There's a reason that we think killing people is bad. But if these people, if these companies need to do things that kill thousands in order to outcompete their opponents, they'll do it without a second thought. Entire towns in the United States, God, there's a reason small town America is so maligned. Hundreds of millions of people have been plunged into housing insecurity, into food insecurity, just because of the relationship between big companies like this to each other and to the productive process. Reminds me of Squid Games. Yeah, at the ground level, we're all being forced to compete with each other so that we can get a job and not starve. And even at the highest level, these companies are all competing with each other to see who can win the game, absorb the spoils from the broken empires of the losers. And that affects all of the people that are struggling to find a job and being forced to compete against each other. Right? It's the same shit with like deadly consequences on both ends. And you know, it's morally bad because when people die and suffer, that's bad. But it's also just societally and like socially, socioeconomically, this is by no means a stable form of socioeconomic organization, right? As I've outlined several times, that, you know, capitalism as a system is built on collapse, right? Built on the, you know, the boom bust cycle, but then the competition between companies necessitates collapse. That is a feature of the system, that you are trying to make the other company collapse so that you can take all their shit. And that affects a lot of people every single time. You know, and oftentimes the collapse isn't only felt at the moment that they like declare bankruptcy and have to sell off a bunch of shit, right? It's felt the whole time, the whole like slow creeping decline. As they mentioned earlier with like veterinary clinics or like hospitals or whatever else being increasingly overrun with bureaucrats who don't give a shit about patient well-being, as opposed to doctors, nurses, and veterinarians whose job revolves around administering good medicine, right? You start to like communities start to deteriorate as like this competition goes on, you know? Understaffing is probably the easiest example of this, like with pharmacies and veterinary clinics as well. I think they talk about this later, if I remember right. You know, pre-watched, got him. He's not a real streamer, whatever. You know, one of the first things to go is staff when you know, big firms like this take over. And so that leaves a lot of people in various communities without jobs because they fired people, and it makes the services worse for the people that can still go to the store and buy stuff or avail themselves of those services because there's not as many people there to render those services. You know?
Panera and your dog and cat.
Over the last decade, massive corporations and private equity firms have been taking over vet care at an alarming rate, owning up to 50% of clinics and up to 75% of emergency hospitals.
75%.
They're also snapping up pet insurance companies and even pet food brands. Among the companies with ties to private equity are PetSmart, Pet Vet Care Centers, Figo, Thrive Pet Healthcare, even ASPCA Pet Health Insurance. This made me wonder,
I've never heard of most of these places, but whatever.
why does Wall Street
cares?
find pet care so appealing?
They see
Yeah, basically Wall Street owns your pet care.
steady money in this business. For private equity, they see a business where they can cut costs or control.
Not surprised, to be honest. Well, Wall Street is the financial capital of the United States, and the United States to varying degrees is the financial capital of the world. So,
costs, while bringing in cash and then sell to a bigger player within the next 4 to 6 years. Or at least
wait, run that back.
see
Hold
a
on.
business where they can cut costs or this business. For private equity, they see a business where they can cut costs or control costs, while bringing in cash and then sell to a bigger player within the next 4 to 6 years. Or at least that's the hope.
Now, that's not just the hope, that's the business model. It's part
Okay,
of
yeah.
something called a roll-up strategy. Private equity buys up
Oh, boy.
practices one by one until they amass dozens.
And the idea is to buy them so that you control more practices and ultimately, hopefully, flip them to a bigger player. Because private equity, unlike, say, family ownership,
Dude, it's actually kind of like the housing crisis, where housing is treated as a market commodity. So your objective is not to live in a house, but rather you buy it and you stay there for a little while, you flip it, and then you sell it for more money, and that way your portfolio line goes up. They want everything to be the housing crisis. Yeah, see, now you get it. Capitalism is something that fundamentally turns everything into the housing crisis, just for different goods and services, right? Where, like, with houses, you buy the house, and then you flip it, the price goes up, and then you sell it, and then you get more money. And, like, every person and every business, to a certain extent, is engaging in that process. And eventually, like, there's, because it's such a profitable process, bets get started, speculation happens, gambling, etc., and it creates this whole house of cards that eventually collapses in on itself. And all the while, there's all sorts of incentives for housing to become worse in its quality, just so that there can be more, basically, like, chips in play. Hell, this kind of stuff is even worse than the housing crisis, because an individual homeowner theoretically benefits from the housing crisis, right? If you own a house and you can sell it for more than you purchased it for, then congratulations, you have benefited from the housing crisis, right? Like, your portfolio went up as a result of that. This kind of shit, the market incentives that are driving most of the economy, you can't even benefit from that shit for the most part. And they'll try to blame anything else, even humans themselves, other than capitalism. Yeah, why do you think it's such an easy default for people to say, oh, humans are so bad, oh, humans are so, like, flawed, oh, humans are so... Because people are so politically unimaginative that they can't picture anything beyond one person. They can't picture the fact that there's this larger system. And, like, every time somebody tells me, oh, humans are so, like, messed up, I want to slap them. I, like, actually want to punch them when they say that, because, like, no, you fucking moron. People have never been like, oh, the amount of virtue and vice present in humanity right now is basically the same as it's been for all time. There's a reason that systemic problems exist in this current system that didn't exist in previous systems, or had very different manifestations in previous systems.
Independent ownership is not in it for the long haul.
During the pandemic, interest rates were low and borrowing money was cheap. So companies borrowed lots of money and bought up lots of clinics and hospitals.
It's about at this time that you start seeing the veterinary prices start really surging.
And of course, this is during the pandemic when people are also getting more pets, like they're at home with their pets. And what impact has that had on vet care and vet clinics?
It affects it like it affects anything in the healthcare sector. Corporations consolidate so that they have greater pricing power. So you can raise prices higher, you can cut back on quality of service if that's how you feel you're going to need to make more money.
In other words, pricing goes up and quality goes down. And it's not so great for the people working in veterinary care either.
I wanted to be a vet ever since I was 5 years old.
This is Melissa Azell, a vet at a small animal clinic in Alabama.
Doggies.
So, Melissa, why did you decide to become a vet?
I've always loved animals, dogs and cats especially. I wanted to be able to be part of a profession where I felt like I was making a difference.
Melissa worked at Banfield, a corporate pet hospital, and then at an independent clinic in Alabama that was bought up by National Veterinary Associates.
God, see, you can't escape. You can't fucking escape this shit. It's like, oh yeah, first she worked at the corporate environment, then she tried to escape the corporate environment, but then the corporate environment followed her and bought up the fucking clinic that she was working at.
It's owned by a private equity firm called JAB. Soon after it
There's
was
JAB
bought,
Holdings.
She said she started noticing some big differences in how it was run.
There's a lot of people in those management positions who
Nice
don't even
shoes.
have
Hold
any-
up. I like those shoes. There is no escape from capitalism. Yeah, I mean, like, capitalism is a system that is pervasive. It is a set of rules and norms and whatever along which society is run. There are variations from country to country, whatever, but there's a set of basic principles. Essentially, it's, you know, the rules, the conditions of whatever. You have to change the rules and conditions and guidelines of how society works. It almost actually is a companion piece to the social contract. You actually do have to change it in order for that to be different. People think that you could just run. Yeah, look, I hate to break it to people. Well, I mean, somebody's going to have to break it to them. There is no escaping capitalism. Where society exists, for the most part, it is a capitalist society, right now, in today's world. You know? Which means the same, and what that means is the same pressures will be present. Businesses will operate for profit. Labor will be seen as a cost to be cut, not an asset to be invested in. You know, the competition will be the name of the game between companies and between workers. You know, anything that happens in the United States, any of this enshittification that is happening here in America, it might not be happening right now everywhere else in the world, but you're not safe from that shit no matter where you are. And that's the fucking problem.
People in those management positions who don't even have any experience in the veterinary field. When I was working for Banfield, one of our regional managers had worked for a Walgreens pharmacy, and that was the closest experience that she had with veterinary medicine.
Melissa says she and her team also started feeling pressure to increase profits.
See, that's kind of the divide with between like actual clinicians and then administrators, is that like when you have administrative experience, the company's like, okay, good enough, whatever. Here, you go administrate this veterinary clinic. We don't care that you don't have any experience in veterinary medicine. Your job isn't to give a shit about the pets.
She and her team also started feeling pressure to increase profits. They had a set number of patients with an allotted time for appointments. They worked with less staff for longer hours. And the company required their patients to have treatment plans.
Sometimes they will put a lot of things in the plans that aren't totally necessary. It's not something that you can opt out of. There are things that, you know, in theory, might you catch some things earlier than you would have otherwise? Sure, but does every single puppy that comes into a clinic need a DNA test? No.
And the same thing with standardized protocols.
But you see, it's profitable to give medical care where it's not warranted and to deny medical care where it is warranted, because that way if we create two separate boxes with an idiosyncratic smattering of treatments that are allotted to each box, then you can charge people twice as much, or you can charge people twice when they need one thing and then the other, as opposed to, you know, them coming in on an as-needed basis.
Built into software.
If you're, you know, this specific patient, you're like, oh, well, due to their breed, this drug may not be a good one. I would rather use this. I'm worried about their kidneys. I want to adjust this. You may or may not have the freedom to do that. And generally those things, if they're made by executives, they are based on things like papers, consensus statements, that kind of thing. But again, there may or may not be any customizability.
Wow, I didn't know that. And do you think that these protocols are designed for profit?
Is that how they design them?
Yeah.
So to maximize how much money they can get off the patient per visit.
I did not know that.
We spoke with many vets and techs for the story who described similar problems at private equity-owned clinics: corporate pressure, cost cutting, and toxic work environments. Some even said the stress was so bad that clinic managers were developing ulcers and losing their hair.
It's really stressful when you feel like you can't do your job appropriately because your job affects patients' lives and like the quality of medical care that they're getting. And, you know, medical care isn't cheap.
No one except for Melissa was willing to go.
This is one of the most brutal forms of alienation out there that I could possibly imagine. If you are a clinician of any sort, veterinary clinic, or just a regular clinic or a hospital, whatever, doctors, nurses, where your job, like as a nurse or as a doctor, is, yeah, I'm trying to care for people or their pets as well as I can, you know, give them the best treatment so they can live a long life, a happy life, etc., so I can stop diseases, yay. And the company is like, okay, that's great and all, but you need to act contrary to that here, here, and here. You can't spend so much time with these patients. You're not allowed to, like, recommend this drug. You have to recommend this drug that, like, we also own the production over. Like, you have to recommend our in-house version of that, even if it's not warranted. This was a big problem with the opioid epidemic, where doctors were over-prescribing things, often because they were facing pressure from above, that you need to do things that are not good for your patient, because otherwise we'll fire you. Yeah, it's designed to break your will. Like, of course these people are losing hair and developing ulcers and, like, succumbing to stress on the job, right? Their job as a clinician is to, like, care for the patient. But, like, their bosses, their administrative bosses are telling them, if you care for the patient, we will fire you. What the fuck do you do? I'll tell you what you do. It involves a length of rope and a gallows, and the boss being on full display for the audience.
On camera out of fear of losing job opportunities in an industry that is rapidly being taken over by private equity. But Melissa eventually left NBA and found a job at a private clinic where she says she is much happier.
Money isn't everything. You have to be able to pay your rent and you have to be able to buy groceries. But you could get paid all the money in the world, and if you aren't made to feel like your company cares about your well-being, that's not a good alternative.
Another bad alternative.
And this speaks to alienation, where, like, people don't operate this way. Companies, sure, money is everything to a company, right? To a business. Money isn't everything to people. Right? You could be paid not that much money and love what you do, right? The alienation is your relationship to work being like, there's a fundamental breakage there, right? Where if you're paid a lot of money, but you feel like that you're being prevented from making the world any better, if you feel like you're making the world worse, like you've failed to do something good, that like you've been forced to do something bad, it doesn't matter if you're getting paid 6 or 7 figures, that's going to wear on you. You know? And that is not good for the social health of a society.
Another bad alternative is going bankrupt. We've also seen how private equity doesn't just drive up prices while lowering quality of service, but also puts businesses at risk. Take Envision Healthcare, a massive physician staffing firm that private equity giant KKR bought for $10 billion in 2018. KKR had only $5 billion, so they borrowed the rest. Envision's way of making money? Loading patients with medical debt. The company eventually collapsed under its own debt. Incidentally, KKR,
I fucking hate the debt economy so much.
which is reported to have investments in everything from Israeli weapons manufacturing.
This medical staffing agency went into debt, offloaded that debt on consumers, right? They have their fingers in many pies, including veterinary clinics. So this is part of the cycle of like weirdo like investors that decide that your dog has to die because you can't pay $10,000 up front. And by the way, also they are a like defense contractor that invests in Israel. Are you starting to see? Okay, this video is meant like for liberals and social democrats that aren't quite sold on like the critique of capitalism as a concept, of the critique of like investment for profit and only for profit, and money as the sole economic force that drives the market, and the market as the force that drives economics, right? Like where it's, oh yeah, line has to go up. That is the sole force that all economics is contingent upon. Are you starting to see the problem? Are you guys starting to see the problem here? Where like mass suffering, like acute mass suffering, but now mass suffering, any kind of suffering, if you can administer it over a long enough time, is like really profitable. Either because like there's always new bombs to be invented, or because like you can extort people for money if their dog is going to die otherwise. Like, are you starting to see that there's an essential problem to this relationship between institutions that render services or have control over certain resources and the people who rely on those resources? Probably say we just have to live with this, bro. What do you want? What I want is for like the world to not look like this. What I want is for defense contractors not to exist. What I want is for private equity not to exist. What I want is for the fucking veterinary clinics to be owned and run by the clinicians. God damn it. It's not that unreasonable of an ask, guys. I don't know how liberals twist themselves into pretzels over this. If there is a hospital, fucking radical concept, I know. A hospital should probably be owned by the doctors, plural, that work there, right? Because, you know, a hospital should be germane to the community that surrounds it, right? Should be owned by the community, run by the doctors that work there. And there shouldn't be any, like, financial bureaucrats saying, yeah, you're not allowed to administer these kinds of treatments because it doesn't sufficiently make our line go up. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask, especially when the model that we're looking at right now, where financial bureaucrats own fucking everything, and not oftentimes even calling them financial bureaucrats is giving them too much credit, because these people are dumb fuckasses who like only know how to gamble on the stock market, but it's legitimized so they get to pretend it's not gambling and watch line go up, and they're just oblivious to or don't care about the fact that when line goes up, thousands die. You know? Here I am imagining, I'm here imagining a liberal in my head that would be defending this, but this video is predicated on the fact that I feel like if you're a liberal, you probably wouldn't defend this. You know, this is supposed to like elucidate the problem with capitalism as a system, that fundamentally there's a breakdown in society that is contingent on the way in which it's organized, right? It's not just a matter of your boss making 300 times as much as you. The problem is the reason for which your boss makes 300 times as much as you, right? Because they have a fundamentally different relationship to the company than you do. These doctors, these nurses have a fundamentally different relationship to their own clinics and hospitals than the bureaucrats that run them.
Staffing firm that private.
So where were we, right? Oh yeah, we were right about here. These people also invest in Israel and are deep in the pocket of like defense lobbies and defense contractors. Okay, carry on.
Firms, oil pipelines.
Oh great. The topic of 2 other videos I have queued up. Israel and data centers. Oh, great. So the same people that are saying your dog has cancer, pay up $3,000 a month for the treatments, are also investing in data centers, which is an economic black hole that money gets poured into, never to be seen again.
Firms, oil pipelines, West Bank real estate.
These people are evil maxing, dude. Do you see what I mean? These are like the most evil fucks on planet Earth.
Electronic music festivals and nursing homes is also one of the major investors in vet clinics as well. And it's not just healthcare. Private equity is taking over everything, from portable toilets to car washes to mixed martial arts, even fire trucks. More Perfect Union did an episode about it, and it was one of the reasons so many fire trucks were out of commission when the LA fires broke out, leading to disastrous results. Fires, one of the reasons so many fire trucks were out of commission when the LA fires broke out, leading to disastrous results.
I beg your pardon. I'm fucking... What's that? I'm reminded of that one clip of Dr. Umar of all fucking people where he's just like, I beg your pardon?
Even fire trucks. More Perfect Union did an episode about it, and it was one of the reasons so many fire trucks were out of commission when the LA fires broke out, leading to disastrous results. So if private equity's foray into...
It's everything. It's fucking everything, dude. Everything is being subsumed into the profit motive and into a profiteering model, into market competition. LA burned for this. Los Angeles burned for this. Your dog died for this. Your grandma or grandpa died for this. LA burned to the ground for this. Fucking tens of thousands of Palestinians, hundreds of thousands at this point. God, for the relationship between defense contractors and Israel goes well beyond just the events post 2023. Hundreds of thousands, millions of Palestinians have died for this.
Healthcare and other industries like fire trucks have created such outrage and have caused so many companies to fold. The concern is the same thing could happen to vet clinics and hospitals too. So is anyone
is happening presently, by the way.
Doing anything about it? The answer is yes, sort of, but not much. A few years ago, the FTC stepped in and passed antitrust laws.
When Jab bought a whole bunch of clinics, they put conditions on them. They had to report in certain states, including California and Texas, any purchase near one of the, I believe it was the specialty care clinics they already owned prior to completing the purchase. That was under the Biden administration.
I fucking love Lena Khan, by the way. She's great. She was, by the way, she was like, I think the first person that the Trump administration got rid of. Lena Khan from the FTC.
One of the, I believe it was the specialty care clinics they already owned.
What is this? It was
They put conditions on them.
A few years ago, the FTC stepped in and passed antitrust laws.
Oh, nice.
Jab bought a whole bunch of clinics. They put conditions on them. They had to report in certain states, including California and Texas.
There's a point I want to make here, but I'll let her finish.
Near one of the, I believe it was the specialty care clinics they already owned prior to completing the purchase. That was under the Biden administration, Lena Khan-led FTC. So whether that's going to go anywhere post the Trump administration, nobody seems to know.
This is another flaw directly with the liberal state. Even when a liberal government is willing to intervene, which credit to the Biden admin, Lena Khan did on numerous occasions, like genuine, like fucking vanguard ally of the working class in government, Lena Khan. This move, as good as it was, saying like, all right, you've already bought these places, but we're going to put all these extra restrictions on you. You have to disclose such and such. You have to report so and so. It's not enough. Whatever the state does, the relationship that the state has to these productive magnates, these magnates that lord over production and services, is one where they're perpetually being outsped in the race to consolidate, right? Like the consolidation is happening quicker than it can be regulated. And again, that's a result of the relationship that exists between these institutions, right? And of course, because this was like an administrative official in Biden's government, the next government can just remove her and be like, all right, nope, carry on.
The Trump administration has been very friendly.
So just regulating these businesses, just putting certain restrictions on them is not enough. Because if those restrictions remain in place, they'll find a way around them. They will lobby the government to, chip away at those regulations over time, as we've seen happen with various other industries and businesses. Or better yet, the next government will have us like different ideological priorities and just decide, you know what? We can take those restrictions, those regulations completely off the books.
To private equity, refusing to close a tax loophole that largely benefits private equity,
Up at the fucking World Economic Forum, or I don't know if he's actually like presenting to them or whatever, but
that largely benefits private equity fund managers. And just recently, considering an executive order to allow 401ks to invest in private equity.
If you're not cued in, this is what Americans have instead of pensions. Pensions don't exist in America. Instead, we have a 401k, which is when your employer, a private business, takes a bunch of money and sets it up in a 401k account and invests in the fucking stock market. And the idea is that like, oh, yeah, it'll go up with the market. Teehee. They literally gamble with your retirement savings while asking you to contribute more to your retirement savings. Because this country is a fucking joke, and this economic system is a fucking joke.
Meanwhile, some states have passed laws to try
and we're all the punchline.
Stop anti-competitive behavior. And they've made it illegal for non-veterinarians to own clinics to try and prevent corporate interests from influencing vets' judgment.
This is, again, a good and really important step, but it's not enough.
But honestly, I would expect to see more of these chains, not less, as private equity firms buy up even more clinics and expand into other pet services. Just last year, private equity company Blackstone purchased Rover. It's an online pet sitting and dog walking company. And Jab Consumer Partners is buying up pet insurance. And this
Not gonna lie, for a fucking split second, I thought that this guy was gonna step on the dog when he raised his leg like that.
It's an online pet sitting and dog walking company.
Does anybody else feel like that's what's being telegraphed here, like a little bit? Especially given the attitude that these companies have towards pets, where it's like, we'll charge you thousands for this. Like, come on, look at the way he's queued up here. The way this dog is looking at him. I feel like, I don't know.
And Jab Consumer Partners is buying up pet insurance. And the sad thing is, we know that as prices continue to go up, people don't take their pets to the vet as often, or they abandon them altogether.
Whether that's pets not getting treated for heartworm or fleas, whether that's the uptick in shelter intakes, which a lot of shelter people believe is partly as a result of the private equity and corporate players in the veterinary business raising prices so that people can't afford to take care of pets.
For my partner and me, it was not easy to pay all the bills for Utah's illness, but We had so much hope and just kept forking over cash. More than $15,000 total.
They got $15,000 out of this woman, stringing her along by saying like, well, you know, if you don't pay this money, we're not going to render treatment for your dog. And your dog dies. Nobody had to say that up front because that's the rule. If you don't pay up, you don't get the treatment. And if this dog didn't get the treatment, the dog will die. I think the dog passed away anyways. Dog died anyways. But the companies made sure to squeeze $15,000 out of a fucking suffering dog and this poor woman before the end. Who knows? There might have even been something that they could have done to save this fucking dog's life. And we'll never know because the corporations would have rather, like the fucking private equity hawks, the vultures that own these clinics would rather drag their feet, sending you like on a wild goose chase around town to do 1 billion tests. You know, before telling you that treatment will literally bankrupt you. And so it's like, okay, go bankrupt or sacrifice your dog. Like, those are your two choices.
Even after her surgery, the fluid kept coming back and her health kept declining. It was getting to the point that she was having trouble getting up. We knew the time had come. It's the pact that we make with our pets, that we're going to be there for them to ease their pain. And
literal gangster stuff? Buddy, gangsters aren't even this bad. The mafia is less bad than this. You know, they'll at least have the decency to shoot you or your dog up front. Spare them the fucking suffering, right? The agreements that people enter with the mob are less extortive, are less extortionary than regular ass businesses. I guess that's kind of the reason that like you don't really have the mafia in America anymore. At least not that you hear about anyways. Fucking you can't like get seedier and like more exploitative than what just regular ass legally sanctioned businesses already do.
Do what's best. So we took her on a final golf cart ride, something that she loved to do, to the beach by her house one last time. And Yvette came to her home that day and put our girl to sleep on Valentine's Day. She passed peacefully at home with us and her favorite frisbee and ball by her side. The experience obviously left us grieving our dog, though there's nothing that we wouldn't have done for her. And that love is what private equity is exploiting.
The fact of the matter is no matter how you look at it,
Plus, also, something that I forgot to mention when I was talking about how this is like worse than the mafia and gangsters actually supported labor unions. That's one of the arguments frequently that conservatives actually use against labor unions is that there was a lot of mafia presence in a lot of trade and labor unions in the 20th century. You know why the mafia did that? It was so that the workers, the laborers, could have a very consistent flow of income, so they could continue with a stable like base of operations. Because the mafia was more based around like human capital, as in people as resources, than anything. It was in the interest of the mob that people weren't getting so fucking exploited at work that they couldn't do what the mob like needed them to do. The mafia, like whatever depiction of the mafia you are seeing, it is significantly less evil than these private equity fucks who will kill your dog for a couple $1,000.
Is a number on somebody's spreadsheet.
Or rather, not just kill them, but actually like torture them first.
No stupid questions. Ask questions and be involved in the care that your pet is receiving. And if there's things that you don't like, then like stand up for, you know, yourself as a pet owner and stand up for your babies and ask why.
Now, don't get me wrong, the vet care I found at independent clinics was expensive too. That's partly just due to advancing medical technology that comes with progress. But that's an expected increase in cost. Private equity, on the other hand, is squeezing the industry to the point where owning a pet might become impossible. Whether that's due to rising prices and falling quality of care, or whether they drive vets into bankruptcy in the future, like they have with other types of human healthcare. We're always looking to tell more stories like this.
Thank you, More Perfect Union. Very cool. Everybody go subscribe to More Perfect Union. Private equity, I think, is like, they talk a lot about private equity, and I think that's one of their strengths. They are like God's strongest warriors against private equity firms. Understand that private equity is just the ultimate form of capitalism. Every company starts to operate more and more like private equity over time under a capitalist mode of production, because the rule is that you need money to operate. So you need money coming in. So you need to make a profit. But actually rendering services, if you're a grocery store providing high quality food consistently, if you're a clinic treating your patients and offering good medicine, especially if it's at a price that people can afford, is not very profitable. The incentive for every single business is necessarily to push things to such a limit that people are willing to go into debt to buy whatever it is you're selling, right? That's why behavior like this almost always hits the essential areas of life first. It's always like the medical industry and like housing and education where you first see debt crises emerging, right? And then maybe consumer goods. Although I think in the case of the US, it happened about the same time. Consumer goods is not as like immediately pressing in some instances because like it's more elastic. Demand for consumer goods is more elastic. With products such as medicine and food that are inelastic, a debt crisis means like you'll die if you can't get, well, I mean, like you die anyways if you can't get your medicine, so you're willing to go into debt over it. And then like you really don't want to default on that debt or bankrupt yourself or whatever, because, you know, you'll die. Or in this the case of this video, your dog or cat will die. You know? And that's a necessary part of like a market economy with money and growth and profit. Like that's the rule. And we've started to get to the point where like people existing and needing certain things, certain goods and services to stay alive is starting to violate those rules. So why don't we fucking change the rules then, you know? And I don't just mean like carve out exceptions. See, in a social democratic framework, it would be like carving out certain exceptions where that set of rules doesn't apply. Doesn't matter how many exceptions you carve out, those exceptions can be reversed and the rule still exists. You know, that rule of like profit driving economics. You get me. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how that's gonna play with the folks at home. I intended this to be basically like, oh yeah, actually, I was gonna say I intended this to be like a video where I try to communicate some of the problems with capitalism, not just with like the most runaway effects of capitalism, but with capitalism necessarily to a liberal and social democratic audience, the type of which you might find in Europe. You know, because I know there are some people in Europe that watch my channel. Shoutouts. And I don't just mean 1v3. But there's also this Blue Sky post that I think drives the point home extremely concisely. I noticed this was August 8th, so about a week ago, I think I saw this. As the U.S. hits a 33-year high in measles infections. There's a measles outbreak as a product of RFK Jr. running the Department of Health and Human Services and like deciding that vaccines are cringe and degenerate and shit like that. There's now a race to find a treatment for the disease. One pharma company, quote, is banking on a continuing decline in vaccination rates to fuel a need for measles treatments and, in turn, more investor interest. This is not just a problem of, like, lack of regulation. This is a problem fundamentally with the relationship, the bedrock, like, underlying relationship that companies like this have to society. Their reaction isn't, oh shit, we need to marshal our resources to like reintroduce vaccination drives and shit and invest in news media to like, you know, to tell people, guys, vaccines are safe and effective. We will provide them for cheap so society can be stable so we can keep doing business in the long run. No, their interest is, oh shit, people are getting sick. We can make a shitload of money off of this in the short run. There's so much money that we could make if we offered people recurring treatments for measles as opposed to vaccines, as opposed to like vaccinating them so that they're actually inoculated for like long term. Wherever mass death and mass suffering is possible, companies see a potential base of customers that literally don't have the ability to say no to whatever price tag gets foisted in front of them. And that is disastrously problematic. It is like catastrophically bad, and it is baked in to any capitalist mode of production, even in Europe, even in the most well-regulated social democratic welfare state. This is possible. They wish they could just log into your bank account. I mean, yeah, if there was a law that allowed them to do that. I mean, shit, banks already do that. There's such a thing as overdraft fees, where if you withdraw too much, the bank is like, I'll be taking that. They snag some money from your bank account. That's a thing. I think in Europe, they might genuinely not have this. For anybody that doesn't know, in America, you can be penalized for withdrawing too much of your own fucking money from your bank account. And by penalize, I mean the bank takes some of your money. It's like, oh, you wanted too much of your own money, so we're going to take some. They literally, like, there's seldom a caricature that you could invent that doesn't actually exist of capitalism. Like how I made a joke and you're like, no, that's actually real. Yeah, it's crazy. You fucking make an offhand joke about capitalism like, haha, I bet they would do this if they could. It's like, no, they actually do that. They can. So they do it. I hope, okay, just one more time to end it off. I hope any social democrats, any liberals watching, particularly the Euro bros, shout outs to you guys. I hope you guys understand that these are like problems inherent to a system. These are systemic problems that have like that are baked in. And in order to solve these, you would actually have to change the entire system. You'd have to, you know, you'd have to make systemic alterations, not just to carve out an exception, but to change the fundamental rule about how that works, about how business works, you know, so that profit isn't the driving force anymore, because profit has started to like hollow out the essential goods and services that people need in order to survive, right? Like it's necessarily a thing that they will come for that eventually, because the motive of businesses is to grow and expand. And eventually there's a point where they can't grow or expand anymore. Certainly not by doing like actual things that are tangibly good for society. And even before that point, doing things that are tangibly good for society may cut off opportunities for growth that they have in the long term. So they'll start undercutting their own services, undercutting the quality of their own products, destroying people's lives, outright killing people, plunging people into debt, making society worse just so they can control more of it. Anyways, that's the segment. Cut it there. Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.